this game could be a potential Europa League semi-final in the making. But in the Premier League, it's a relegation, a battle for Tottenham, and a place in the Champions League up for grabs for Aston Villa. Nottingham Forest against Aston Villa in the Premier League this weekend is going to be a huge, huge game. Dan, this too maybe shows you the strength of the Premier League. Forest are in a relegation scrap. Villa are trying to get into the Champions League, but both teams potentially could be playing a Europa League semi-final in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it's a really interesting subplot going into Sunday's clash. The fact they're both in the Europa League on Thursday nullifies the potential for one team to be fresher than the other. They've both got to play on Thursday, so they meet on Sunday. So that is a bit of an equaliser. Obviously, both teams got something to play for. We're in that final lap of the season, but Aston Villa, as you say, are pushing for Champions League football. And although there's a cushion between themselves and Liverpool and Chelsea, they can't relax just yet. Nottingham Forest can't relax in their bid to stay out the relegation zone. Obviously, that massive win over Tottenham before the lengthy international break. But they've got to keep that going. They can't just stop on 32 points because there's still 7 games to go. So they will be just as keen to build on that win with a further result on Sunday.
All right, in terms of who needs this one the most, Villa still have a bit of a cushion. Arsenal's win in the Champions League in midweek ensured that there will be 5 teams from England in the Champions League next season. Does that give Unai Emery's side a bit of wiggle room, especially if they lose the game at Forest? It wouldn't be the end of the world.
Yes, I think just the fact that there's a 5-point cushion between themselves and Liverpool, and the fact that Liverpool aren't red hot by any stretch of the imagination at the moment, then yes, the cushion is there for Aston Villa. I think with Nottingham Forest, not necessarily a must-win game. I think a lot will depend on what West Ham do on Friday night. That will then set up the weekend. Obviously, Tottenham playing the same day, so we're not really going to know how that shapes out until the end of Sunday afternoon. But for a Forest perspective, I think they've really got to get something from this game. Villa could lose and still be unchanged in fourth. So I think the balance of more determination will be with Nottingham Forest. Whether they can get that over the line, we'll have to wait and see.
What's been the story in the Premier League this year? You look at teams like Tottenham, who obviously, yes, they've got a lot of players out injured, but he's still got a lot of quality in the team, and they're really down in the doldrums as far as the Premier League table is concerned. And then you look at a team like Forest, who signed a lot of players in the transfer window in the summer, and they're also struggling in the relegation places. What has happened to those two teams, especially Forest, who looked like they were on the up last season, and it's gone all pear-shaped this season?
Well, I think it's fundamentally managerial change. They're now in their 4th manager this season, which is almost unprecedented at Premier League level. So you look at it and think just the fact that there's been no real stability across the campaign. Yes, there are managerial changes throughout, but let's say if there were just one, would Forest be in such a bad position? The fact it's kind of been so many segments of a campaign which has led them to this. Obviously, the natural disappointment of not getting the Champions League last season, the fallout of that, and it's always just been a kind of a bit of a tailspin for Nottingham Forest this season. They are also quite capable of picking out a result when it really matters, but there's so many players coming in and out that there's no real cohesion in the team either. So it's been a strange campaign. I think really they just need to get to the end of the line, and if they are in the Premier League, then hopefully that'll keep Vitor Pereira in a job for the next few months, and they can try and build on that and try and get back to at least the top half. I think really they just need to get to May in the top 17 and kind of try to forget the campaign. And if they do win the Europa League, that'll be the cherry on top.
For Aston Villa, let's talk about their manager, Unai Emery. You talked about the Forest manager. At the start of the season, things didn't particularly go well for Villa, and then they picked it up a bit. It's all gone a little wrong at the moment. They're still in contention for the Europa League and still in the hunt for Champions League football in the Premier League. There's a bit of a, it's not dissenting voices in particular, but there's almost a thing like you feel like he's done the maximum he can do for this Villa team at the moment. Is there maybe a call around the club that maybe his time might be up soon?
It's a difficult one because, you're hitting a ceiling, but you're hitting a ceiling which is very high. So it's unfair to sort of say that Emery's doing a bad job. I think the disappointment, if there is disappointment, is framed around the fact that they were skirting around the title race around Christmas and they've had that drop off. But I guess it's how you frame it in the sense that they were in the title race for, albeit, 2-3 weeks, but still to get into that conversation should be lauded. So just to be outside of it and to be seen to be running out of steam and fizzling out it's an unfair lens, really. I think if Aston Villa start well, they started badly this season. Look at where they are now. I think they'd be silly to sort of make too many overzealous changes, especially with the manager. But there's always that demand of constant progress. And yes, if you are just sort of hitting third and fourth, people will want second and third. Why can't we go and win the title? So can Villa win a title? I'm not too sure. Does that mean that they need a new manager to get over the line? I don't think that is the case either. I just think Aston Villa are a very good team which can be very handy within the top six, and obviously they're fourth at the moment, but I just don't think they're a championship winning team. So whether that's a stick to beat Unai Emery with, I'm not too sure, but obviously people want success. They want it yesterday, really, and that's the problem that Aston Villa have at the moment. So again, probably it's Europa League will sweeten that deal, and they can sort of say, right, that and the top 5 finish is a great season, but it's about sustaining that, because if you stand still in the Premier League, you end up going behind anyway.
Right, so let's put our belly caps on for this one. How does this one go?
I think both teams playing in Europe. I think, obviously, as I say, that's not going to give either side an advantage, but I feel this will be a draw, actually. I just feel that local derby of sorts. I think if Villa can get out of this one with a point, that's not a bad result. Forest are going to be difficult to break down, especially with needing points themselves. So I just feel that, especially if Forest can get the first goal, I think that might make it more interesting. So I think a share of the points is the way to go here. Maybe a score draw. So I think a 1-1 draw in the correct score market as well, if you want a little bit more value. But I'm going to go for a share of the points at the City Ground.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan. Details always.
Thanks, Tolu.